This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Two separate diseases are destroying banana and plantain crops in Africa. They could threaten food security for millions of Africans who depend on bananas as an important part of their diet. Banana bacterial wilt was first reported in Ethiopia in the late 1960s. In 2001, it was found in Uganda. Since then, it has spread to neighboring countries, including Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The leaves of infected plants weaken and become yellow. They also leak a yellow liquid. The bananas ripen too quickly and begin to rot. Farmers can unknowingly spread the infection with their cutting tools. Experts say by the time a farmer discovers that something is wrong, it is already too late. The crop must be destroyed. Uganda is Africa's leading producer and consumer of bananas. The organization Biodiversity International reports losses of up to 80% in heavily affected areas of the country. Farmers worry that a second disease could also spread to Uganda. Bunchy top disease causes all of the leaves to grow from the top of the banana plant. Infected plants produce small, abnormal fruit. Finally, they stop producing completely. The International Institute for Tropical Agriculture says the disease is widely found in Gabon, Angola, Malawi, the Republic of Congo, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Institute's Rashid Hanna says farmers must destroy infected plants, normally by burning them. Bunchy top disease can spread from plant to plant and is also spread by aphids. These small insects must be destroyed. Rashid Hanna advises farmers to use biological controls, such as natural enemies of the aphids. He says bunchy top disease and banana bacterial wilt can both affect entire plantations. Experts say the two diseases together have caused losses of up to 90% in some areas. Not only are farm incomes affected, but so are local food supplies. Experts say more than 30 million people could be at risk of shortages unless a solution is found. Scientists from around the world met in Tanzania in August to discuss the situation. Rashid Hanna says strong measures must be taken now to prevent a crisis in the future. He said controlling the diseases would go a long way to improve people's food security and livelihoods in sub-Saharan Africa. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. UNICEF says the death rate for children under the age of 5 has fallen 28% since 1990. Experts credit the drop to improvements in public health measures. These include vaccination campaigns and the use of bed nets chemically treated to kill mosquitoes that spread malaria. Still, Brian Hansford at the United Nations Children's Fund says more work remains. He says the good news is that the rate of deaths of children under 5 years of age continued to decrease in 2008. The number of child deaths decreased to an estimated 8.8 million from 12.5 million in 1990. Compared to 1990, 10,000 fewer children are dying each day. The bad news is that a yearly death total of 8.8 million is still a tragedy, and so there is still much to do. One of the UN Millennium Development Goals is to reduce the under 5 death rate by 2/3 by 2015. One country that could reach this goal is Malawi. In 1990, there were 225 deaths for every 1,000 live births. The estimate for last year was 100 deaths. UNICEF spokesman Brian Hansford says pneumonia and diarrhea remain the world's 2 greatest killers of young children. 93% of the deaths happen in Africa and Asia. A separate new study looked at deaths worldwide in young people aged 10 to 24. It found that 97% happen in low and middle income countries, and 2 out of every 5 are the result of injuries and violence. Professor George Patton at Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, Australia, was the lead author. The study found that worldwide, more than 2.5 million people aged 10 to 24 died in 2004. Nearly 2/3 were in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. Conditions related to pregnancy and childbirth were a leading cause of deaths in females. But for both sexes combined, the leading killer in this age group was traffic accidents. 10% of all the deaths were blamed on road injuries. Next came suicide and violence. Also in the top 10 causes were infections, including tuberculosis and HIV/AIDS, as well as drowning and fire-related deaths. The study appears in the journal The Lancet. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Clay is found almost everywhere in the world. It is formed by the action of wind and water on rocks over thousands of years. The rocks change in both chemical and physical ways. Chemically, elements like potassium and aluminum are added and taken away. Physically, the rocks break down into smaller and smaller pieces. After a long time, some of the rock changes to clay. Clay is important because it is used around the world to make containers of all kinds. Potters add water to soften the clay. This makes it easier to form into shapes by hand or by machine. Then it is fired in an extremely hot stove. The result is a container with a hard surface that will last for many years. In many countries, clay was formed from volcanoes. This kind of clay usually contains many minerals. So, the fires to make containers from volcanic clay must be hotter than those used for non-volcanic clay. The fires may be as hot as 1,400 degrees Celsius. It is also important to dry the clay containers slowly. This means that the highest temperature should not be reached too fast. You can add materials to clay to gain desired results. For example, you can add sand to prevent tiny breaks or lines from forming in the finished product. But you should not use sand from the coasts of oceans. Instead, you should use sand from rivers or from other areas of land that are not near the sea. You can usually find good clay in low areas of islands or land, especially if volcanoes helped form the land. Clay often exists in fields covered with some water. The clay will be found about 1 meter below the ground. Riverbanks also have clay about 1 meter or less under the surface. You can recognize clay because it is very shiny when it is wet. You can also perform a test. Take some of the material and add enough water to it to make it seem like you are making bread. Then press it in your hand until it is about the size of an egg. It is probably clay if it holds together instead of falling apart when you stop pressing. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. Guides to working with clay and other materials can be found on the Enterprise Works VITA list of publications. These publications can be ordered for a charge. The list is available at enterpriseworks.org. Transcripts, MP3s, and archives of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. If you travel by bus in Sao Paulo, Brazil these days, your vehicle may be powered by hydrogen fuel cells. The city's urban transportation system recently launched the first of up to 5 hydrogen buses. The hydrogen reacts with oxygen to produce electricity and water. The bus uses a hybrid system that combines the hydrogen fuel cells with high-power batteries. It can be driven 300 kilometers on the hydrogen cell and an additional 50 kilometers on its batteries. The bus carries passengers in communities around Sao Paulo. The United Nations Development Program, the World Bank, and other private, public, and international groups supported the project. Project official Carlos Zunt says the bus is the first of its kind in Latin America. Mr. Zunt says the vehicle releases only water vapor and is totally clean. Traditional buses that run on diesel fuel release harmful carbon dioxide and other pollutants. Most buses around the world run on diesel fuel. Mr. Zunt says diesel vehicles are the main cause of air pollution in Sao Paulo. The cost of the bus has not been announced. Hydrogen fuel cell buses cost more than traditional buses. But Mr. Zunt says reducing air pollution and acid rain will reduce respiratory illnesses for people in the city. In addition, the new bus is very quiet and does not produce noise pollution. Mr. Zunt says a hydrogen bus will last an average of 20 years, while a diesel bus can be used for 5 to 8 years. Sao Paulo has almost 20 million people. Almost half of them ride buses every day. Brazil has a large, modern, and competitive bus industry. It is one of the top producers in the world. The project hopes to export hydrogen fuel cell buses in the future. A Brazilian report says that Brazil is one of 5 countries that have developed such buses. The others are the United States, China, Germany, and Japan. But not everyone sees the hydrogen fuel cell bus as the hope of the future. Critics note the high cost of producing hydrogen. And they say other kinds of energy choices can provide power for buses. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. Transcripts and podcasts of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Today we bring you a new take on an old tale. It's the story of the 3 little pigs and the big bad wolf that blew down one house made of straw and one made of sticks. The only house left standing was the one made of bricks. Now there is new evidence to suggest that houses built with bales of straw can be very strong. They are also environmentally friendly. Pete Walker is a professor at the University of Bath in Britain. He and a team of researchers there have built a house made out of straw bales and hemp material. During the next 12 months, the team will study the effectiveness of these materials in home building. Professor Walker says there are many good reasons for using straw. He says it is a renewable material that is readily available and does not cost much money. Professor Walker says straw takes in carbon dioxide as it grows, so it has no harmful effects on the environment. He says straw helps the environment in other ways. The straw bale walls are thick, so the buildings require very little heating in the winter or very little cooling in the summer. The buildings require very little additional energy. Professor Walker says this reduces home operating costs. It also reduces the effect on the environment. He says the current interest in straw bale houses is a direct response to the problem of climate change. David Landfair owns an eco-friendly home building service in the United States called Bale on Bale Construction. He says he laughed when some friends first told him about houses built of straw. But after doing his own research, he learned that building with straw bales makes a lot of sense. He has now helped to build more than 10 straw bale houses and says the building material is becoming more widely accepted. To build the houses, he fills a wood frame with tightly packed bales of straw. Next, he coats the walls inside and out with layers of clay plaster. He says the common ideas about straw houses continue, including stories about the threat of fire. Mr. Landfair says straw bale houses have done well when tested for fire resistance. And he says his builders use the same methods as traditional builders to keep out rain. He says, we use what we call good shoes and a good hat. And that would be a solid foundation and a really good roof. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. Our reports are online at voaspecialenglish.com. This is the VOA Special English Development Report. A new study shows that lead-based paint remains a worldwide threat to public health. Paint containing lead is a major cause of lead poisoning in children. The heavy metal enters the body when children breathe the paint dust or fumes in the air, or when babies put their mouth on painted surfaces or swallow pieces of paint. Lead can damage the brain and the nervous system. It can decrease intelligence, create behavior problems, and slow a child's growth. Researchers tested new household enamel paints from 12 countries in Africa, Asia, and South America. The paints were sold under different brand names. The study found that almost 3/4 of the brands had dangerously high levels of lead. Scott Clark is a professor of environmental health at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine in Ohio. He said, most of the paint brands that we looked at had at least one sample that was above 10,000 parts per million, which is over 100 times the current U.S. standard. The United States has restricted lead content in paint since 1978. Until August, the safety standard for consumer paints was 600 parts per million. But the Consumer Product Safety Commission has just lowered the limit to 90 parts per million. The new study appears in the journal Environmental Research. The team found levels of lead as high as 32,000 parts per million in tests on some paint samples from Ecuador. Professor Clark's team also published a study in 2006. It found that the majority of new enamel paints from China, India, and Malaysia contained lead at levels of at least 5,000 parts per million. Lead paint can be a danger not only to people in the country where it is made. Exports can spread the danger to other countries. The professor says high-quality paint can be produced without lead. He and his team are calling for a worldwide ban on lead-based paint. He says many parts of the world are doing too little to correct the problem of lead poisoning in children. He notes that research has found no safe level of lead. Of course, lead paint is not the only cause of lead poisoning. Recently, Chinese officials closed a manganese metal factory in Hunan province. More than 1,000 children living nearby were reported to have high levels of lead in their blood. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Before refrigerators were invented, the next best thing was an icebox. But another way to keep food fresh is to use an evaporative cooler. A common design is a tall box with several shelves inside to hold the food. The shelves are pieces of metal with many small holes through them. The sides of the box are covered with pieces of thick cloth. Containers of water are placed at the top and bottom of the cooler. The ends of each piece of cloth lie in the water so the cloth stays wet. The cooler is put outdoors, but not in the sun. Air will pass through the wet cloth. The inside of the box will stay several degrees cooler than the outside air temperature. This may be cool enough to keep foods fresh, at least for a short time. Some foods can make you sick if they are stored in conditions that are not cold enough to prevent the growth of harmful organisms. Freezing can keep some foods in good condition for months after the growing season. Yet foods can be damaged if they are kept too cold. The British development group Practical Action says the best way to prepare foods for storage is at harvest time while still in the field. Use a sharp knife and place the harvested items on a clean surface or directly into storage containers. Do not put them on the ground. Use clean water to remove dirt and keep the water clean. Usually it is better not to remove outer leaves from fruits and vegetables before storage. Without the leaves, food can become dry. Fruits and vegetables must be cool from field heat before they are put into storage. But cooling them in water can spread fungus throughout the food. A better idea is to harvest foods either early or late in the day, then leave them to cool naturally. Some fruits and vegetables must be stored at 0 to 4 degrees Celsius. Any colder and they might be damaged. Some foods need to be stored at 4 to 8 degrees, and some need to be stored above 8 degrees for best results. Wet the fruits and vegetables so they do not become too dry. The best time to do this is before storage. Cover the items in plastic once they reach the right critical temperature for storage. Most fruits and vegetables need the relative humidity in storage to be kept between 85 and 95%. Finally, leave space between the food containers and the walls of the cold storage area so air can flow. Keep the space clean and try not to open the doors too often. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.